Hi, welcome to our channel of IGNU Audiobooks, Indira Gandhi National Open University, School of Gender and Development Studies, SOGS, Postgraduate Diploma in Women's Gender Studies, PGD WGSR, MWG 104 Gendered Bodies and Sexualities, Block 1 Embodiment I, Unit 3 The Laboring Body, 3.1 Introduction, Defining Women by Their Embodied Capacity for Reproduction and as maternal bodies is evident even today, therefore, many the young women are deprived of various prestigious roles within prestigious professions like medicine and other such careers. Getrill, 2008. With this background, the unit will focus on explaining the relationship between women's reproductive bodies and women's productive work, which encompass both unpaid and paid labor. The notion of the woman's body is central to sociological and feminist analysis of power relations and remains a negotiated field of power between men and women in the society. Getrill, 2008. This means that women in the labor room, in the home, within the workplace, or anywhere in the society are primarily defined and recognized by their reproductive characteristics. Based on this notion, woman's reproductive labor ends up determining her positioning in the labor market and society at large. Therefore, women's embodied position as a mother often emphasizes the social significance of the maternal body and reproduction of labor for women, society, and the labor market. Women's labor market choices are tightly tied up with the boundaries of home and unremunerated, unpaid reproductive labor. With this backdrop, the present unit aims at analyzing the interface between women's labor of reproduction and the positioning of woman's body in the home and the labor market. We will attempt to do this by looking at the relationships between embodiment and labor, reproduction, and production. 3.2 Learning Outcomes. After reading this unit, you will be able to times discuss and explain the concepts of the laboring body, times describe different forms of laboring bodies as gendered beings in relation to public and private domains, and times critically analyze dilemmas associated with the female productive body across class, caste, and occupation. 3.3 Understanding women's embodiment and labor. 3.3.1 The female body as the basis of feminist debate. Feminists have often questioned the understanding of female body as biologically given in the analysis of different forms of productive, reproductive, sexualized, and violated bodies. This understanding of the female body from a biological essentialist position makes female bodies vulnerable to oppressive power in society. Therefore, the sociocultural construction of the woman's body forms the basis of various debates within feminism as it relates power, patriarchy, and the female body within spheres of reproduction and production. Women's embodied labor of reproduction, in other words, the role of mother, nurturer, and caregiver experienced and lived through her body similar to Young's conceptualization of lived bodily experience, Young, 2005, p.5, cited in Getrill, 2008, p9. All women live with their reproductive body and engage in activities such as going out to work, carrying out domestic chores, giving birth to children, and playing the role of mother or nurturer. These exemplify the lived experiences of women's embodied labor and simultaneously shape society's attitude towards them. Getrill, 2008. Hence, it can be said that all forms of labor are gendered and equally embodied in nature. This idea can be used to understand the concept of the laboring body while critiquing the biological differences between female and male. Feminists conceptualize women's bodies as socially constructed. Women's labor in the domestic and work domains is devalued. Social norms of being a female or a male get inscribed within the body. This shapes women's and man's understanding of the experience of the lived body in society. For instance, the social construction of the female body includes the practice of childbearing, care, and nurture that produce a particular form of subjective experience for women towards work. This embodied experience of the female body is significant in the discussion of labor. It raises the question which body matters for what kind of work. Therefore, the discussion of the laboring body cannot be dealt with in isolation without looking at its interface with the female biological ability to give birth and to become a mother. Discussion of female labor in the context of reproduction makes us analyze women's subjective embodiment as part of the private domain, which, in turn, limits women's access to paid labor. Laboring bodies are gendered, in nature as also socially constructed. This implies that society expects some specialized tasks or performance from women to prove their bodies are both able and normal. In particular, the reproductive female body is central to our understanding of the normalized female body and women's labor. 3.3 to the reproductive female body versus the laboring female body. The sociological inquiry about the body began in the 1960s with the emergence of the women's liberation movement. Feminist theorists of the first and second waves started questioning the binary representations of the body, i.e., the body is aligned with women and the mind is aligned with men in a hierarchical way. They saw this as leading to a conceptualization of woman's body as a site of suffering. Jeans et al., 2011. The female body, due to its features of menstruation, childbirth, and lactation, was perceived to have limited access in terms of gaining equality in all spheres of life. Feminists of this tradition started questioning the negative image of the body. They focused on questions such as the constitution of the laboring body and the way in which the female laboring body is being formed and managed by structures of economy, culture, and social norms which limit the female body to only one role, that of reproduction. On the other hand, the reproductive female body is considered as an obstruction in the arena of paid work. Women's constant negotiation and struggle to perform forms a significant part of women's embodiment in feminist analysis. All women come across this form of marginalization as women with their first move into the labor market. Reproduction may lead to various forms of constraints in terms of women exercising their choice to work. In contrast, the notion of the reproductive female body is viewed as normative within the family, but not valued as a productive laboring body. Women's continuous conflict with their bodies reflects the inherent dilemma of the laboring body in the family vis-a-vis the work sphere. Further, the aspect of the productive female body demands a compromise of the female reproductive body in the workplace. In the current scenario, motherhood is prioritized through health professionals, media, and government campaigns. You might have seen the recent advertisement by the Ministry of Women and Child Welfare, which emphasizes that every child should be fed mother's milk till first 6 months of life. It re-emphasizes the importance of the reproductive body for women through prioritizing the aspect of compulsory breastfeeding. However, the requirements of breastfeeding are different and hardly accepted within the notion of the productive body in various work cultures. This contradiction demands redefinition of reproductive and productive work in relation to women's body and bodily processes, and not in relation to sex identification or socially expected behavior. The constraints associated with a woman's body are important and need to be located within the discussion on laboring body and paid work. As quoted by Gatrell, notions of leakage and seepage are especially relevant to my discussions of women's paid work because women's propensity to leak has been seen to signify women's otherness, their inherent lack of control of their bodies, and consequently of themselves. Shildrick, 1997, p. 34, cited in Gatrell, 2008. Women's labor is a representation of their bodies in different forms and ways, Hence, understanding bodily functions and constraints can enhance women's subject position in the workplace. For women, the reproductive body and the laboring body can be interchangeably used, as both the aspects refer to the intricate relationship between female body and unpaid labor. 3.4 Positioning women's bodies in non-work processes. As background to this discussion, we will set out in more detail the aims of this unit relating to the labor of love and reproduction, the positioning of women's bodies within the labor market, and carry out an analysis of the labor market in relation to different forms of the female body, such as the maternal body, the productive body, and the liberated body. Here, Judith Butler's work is important as it tries to understand women's work through the material conception of women's embodied experience. Butler speaks of gender in terms of performativity. In a similar way, women are socialized to perform certain roles in everyday life, in turn symbolized with certain spheres and performances. The female laboring body gets formed through socially constructed practices followed in spheres of domestic work and labor. Market, see Gittrell, 2008, p.10. Work both in paid and unpaid form is central to women's existence and embodiment. According to Meenakshi Thapan, women's work is central to their definition in the society, governs their relationship with others, and becomes an instrument to enhance their quality of life. If we take an everyday life perspective to analyze women's labor in a day, it will reflect how a woman uses her body to perform wide-ranging work, starting with domestic labor to paid work, and to maintain social relationships with the community. Within this wide-ranging conception of labor, more often they use their bodies to experience subordination, express resistance to patriarchal norms, and exercise choice within a day. Thapan, 2009, p.132. Glucksmann describes pregnancy as a non-work process, as it is natural to the notion of good motherhood and the maternal body, cited in Gittrell. Therefore, in this section we will look at women's experience of their own subjective bodies in a variety of activities which are described as non-work processes by the society. 3.4.1 The symbolization of biological reproduction. The representation of biological reproduction through various symbols and metaphors is central to analyzing men's work vis-a-vis women's work. The symbolization of reproduction, which is expressed through terms like seed and earth, gives a social definition to the woman's body and associated labor. Leela Dubey, 1986, writes that in parts of northern and central India, the process of biological reproduction is often explained through words such as seed. This emphasizes significance of the father's role, which is essential for the child's identity and survival. The seed gives life to a child through the father's blood. The earth, on the other hand, symbolizes the womb and specifies various roles of the mother as a nurturer. The womb receives the seed and provides warmth and nourishment for the growth of the fetus. Within the sphere of reproduction, the woman's role and her body are emphasized as passive agents, and the existence of her body is undermined. The female body is seen as an instrument for procreation in creating the offspring of the man. Therefore, the child bears relation to the father's blood and identifies himself with patrilineal kinfolks or the male line of descent. The main responsibility of a man is to become the head of the household and perpetuate the name of the family through male offspring. Within family and marriage, the role of a woman is subordinated under patriarchy. A similar expression of female and male labor is found among various groups across tribe, caste, and ethnicity. Dubey writes that among the Gond women, the ideology of seed and earth and the belief attached to it are formed and expressed through the usage of particular phrases or proverbs. Delay in menstruation depicts the inability of the woman's body to perform its reproductive labor in future. Several metaphors have been used in rural India depicting the significance of women's wombs, which simultaneously defines the use of women's bodies in relation to reproductive labor. In the Study of Caste and Kinship of Central India, Mayer remarks on similar illustrations such as, the mother only provides the place for the fetus to grow, Dubey, 1986, p. 28. In Andhra Pradesh, the word Vietnamese is used to describe or refer to man's contribution in procreation, Dubey, 1986, p. 29. In various parts of India, such metaphors of seed and earth are used to symbolize the differential role of women and men in procreation and specify the significance of female body parts and processes within reproduction as well. Veena Das's work, Masks and Faces, an essay on Punjabi kinship, 1976, analyzes the role of mother's blood in procreation. The seed grows into a child in the mother's womb. The bones of the child are formed by the semen and the blood is formed by the mother's blood. That is why menstruation is said to cease in a pregnant woman, cited in Dubey, 1986, p. 30. The above statement suggests the use of female body, blood, for the growth of the child. It also points to a hierarchical relationship or power inequality existing between the mother and the father while bringing up the child. These references, infused in the common consciousness of people, become tools for socializing women into reproduction of a specific type of labor. The symbolization of female body in the process of reproduction depicts a relationship of hierarchy between her body and the reproduction of labor. The implications of this symbolization impact women's access to paid employment and specify the nature of relationship between the two sexes and their relative positions in the society. These reference points emphasize distinction between nature and culture and push the female body further into the domain of nature. Nature is passive, hence the female body is often described as a passive entity in the sphere of reproduction. These connections between the female body, nature and labor have two major implications for women's unpaid labor. Firstly, symbolization expresses the essentially unequal relationship, and secondly, metaphors are used by culture or men to undermine women's contribution and significance in biological reproduction. Dubey, 1986. Further, the physiological connection between mother and the child places upon the mother a moral obligation that results in denial of access to other forms of paid employment. For example, a child's dependence on mother's milk constrains her and, thus going out leaving her baby during lactation leads to negative reactions. She is perceived as neglecting her moral and natural duties. When a woman's body is linked with the earth, it essentializes women's role in the society and her capability to bear a child with pain. Women's labor in reproduction embodies subjective experiences like pain, emotion, and morality. However, those are never valued in the childbirth process. The body of a woman is never situated equally with the body of a man in terms of her contribution toward childbirth. On the contrary, her reproductive labor is invisible and neglected within the private sphere. This form of asymmetrical relationship within the private has its replications in the public domain as well. According to Dubey, the significant aspect of symbolism is how the bodies of two partners are located in the process of reproduction that implicates both the seed and field belonging to the man. She argues that by equating women's body with the earth and man's semen with the seed, we can draw simile metaphor between the process of reproduction and the process of production, in which rights over the crop always remain with the man and not with the women. In general, the man's control over the woman's body allows him to exercise control over women's labor in other forms of productive activities like agriculture, resource management, and so on. Therefore, it is not surprising to see women as wage laborers and a flexible workforce in paid occupations. the understanding of social construction of the female body and labor as passive and supportive to man's labor is sustained even though a woman earns her living through paid labor. Now, let us examine the nature of unpaid labor, particularly in the context of motherhood. 3.4.2 Women and Motherhood, Emancipatory or Constraining. Possessing a female body implies that a woman not only performs work outside the household but also takes on responsibilities associated with childbearing. We can see a dilemma between women's desire for paid work and independence and submission of their selves and bodies to the culture of unpaid work. In general, it is women's labor that constructs their embodied identities as women. Thapan, 2009, discusses issues like the culture of son preference as central to women's labor. For example, women who cannot bear children, especially a son, feel incomplete and useless. In this connection, women's bodies are not only considered as disabled by the society but also a source of social shame and dishonor for the family. The following example from Thapan's book, Living the Body, 2009, aptly illustrates the above points. Pulwati is mother of 3 daughters. She seems to be a cheerful woman, but she looks unhappy when the discussion centered on childbearing. She says, "No one in the society is allowing me to live as the society expects a boy child from me. It is important to have sons as they continue to carry the family name and gives emotional support to the parents during old age." In her saying, she expresses her bodily incapacity to bear a son, thus thesis, implicating the notion of failing reproductive labor to maintain the family name and honor in the society. Thapan. p. 134. It is perceived that the failure of women's embodied labor in meeting the social obligations, desire for a son, leads towards devaluing her subjective self and the body. Women's labor is based on social conditions, hence easily underplayed by the family and community at large. Let us read the story of another woman who has used her productive body as medium to exercise freedom and agency in the society. Sangeeta is in her 30s, expecting her first child after 12 years of marriage. As she narrated, in all these years she has countered her husband and in-laws' actions and words with regard to her childlessness. Apart from her paid labor, she equally contributes intensive and heavy work as part of embodied labor. She says, "Her husband is dependent upon me and will remember me proudly after my death." Men are hungry for women's body. In this connection, she made a distinction between sexual desire and female laboring body. Men exercise power and dominate women by using women's bodies in the execution of socially accepted form of labor, which often not considered as a form of domination by the society. Thapan, p. 136. The female body is seen as a tool to carry out reproductive labor and becomes instrumental in women's oppression. Sometimes, the same body is used by women themselves for their survival against patriarchy. According to Thapan, women's endless contribution towards domestic work can be simultaneously oppressive and liberating. The expression of Sangeeta's anger and pain is not exclusively about her passivity, but an expression of her strength. She was happy that she could pay for her infertility treatment and capable of managing both household work and domestic paid work simultaneously. Here, Sangeeta carries her reproductive body and uses it for her survival and honor within the family. The concept of the maternal body exists across classes. In contemporary times, daily soaps, television serials represent the social construction of the female laboring body to be capable of doing heavy and soft work within the household. Society accepts and appreciates the female body which is capable of doing heavy tasks as it shows physical strength of a woman within the family. The paradox is that the same female body gets disqualified to participate in hard tasks like construction, mining, mechanical engineering, and driving, which entails paid labor in the public domain. We can draw the inference that the division between soft and heavy work is not so much related to the body, but contingent upon the separation between paid labor in the public sphere and unpaid labor in private sphere. Like Sangeeta, many other women use their laboring bodies as sources of survival within the family and in the community. While we talk about reproductive labor, the relationship between women's bodies, work, and mechanisms of fertility control needs to be discussed. Women's decision making for reproductive choice is a significant indicator of their access to different forms of work. However, their choice is deeply embedded in social situations. For example, men's opposition to vasectomy is accepted in the society as they bear the burden of paid work. According to Thapan, women are protective of their husbands who are in need of protection. They require healthy bodies for heavy work. P.141. There is an inherent understanding that men need healthy bodies to perform heavy work. Hence, men should be free from any pain and discomforts. Further, decisions with regard to controlling female fertility rest with men and are imposed upon the female body. Patriarchy draws an inherent relationship between the female body and its capacity to perform only soft tasks, even though it is capable of bearing health risks which are caused due to extraneous factors like sterilization. The idea of having a healthy body is never attached to the reproductive female bodies. It is seen that men often impose sterilization upon women for the following reasons. The labor of reproduction and the labor of love are always associated with the female body, which is strong enough to bear pain and risk, and 2. Concepts like the healthy male body and heavy work are symbiotically related to and reinforce each other. A series of case analyses mentioned by Thapan, 2009, illustrates the above points. In one of the case analyses, Gina wanted to control her fertility and had an abortion and finally an operation. She justified her action by stating that men do not undergo the surgery as their work is heavy. Here, the male reproductive body is perceived to be weak, therefore, women wish to protect their husbands' bodies from any form of damage. Thus, they take decision on their reproductive choices. They project their bodies as strong and capable enough to do hard manual and household work and also bear pain. In all these examples, we can see the differential representation of gendered bodies, i.e., the female laboring body as strong to carry out heavy reproductive labor, vis-a-vis the male body as weak in taking hazards related to reproductive matters. This way of managing the reproductive female body is only a reflection of the patriarchal management of female reproductive and productive labor in a hierarchical relation. Vandy Harcourt, 2009, asks the question, where is the male reproductive body? Within the population and development discourse, discussions on the non-maternal body or male reproductive body were completely silent. In the Caro Program of Action, 1994, men were encouraged to take responsibilities and participate in reproduction-related matters while accepting their social role as fathers. You will read about parental body in the Unit 15 for understanding the changing roles of mother and father in relation to child rearing. According to Harcourt, the family planning agenda in the post-Caro period, which talks about men's reproductive labor and participation at the level of awareness raising, however, fails to put male reproductive bodies under the scanner. It is paradoxical that male bodies are discussed as productive bodies in relation to their roles as workers and as soldiers, but not as fathers, husbands, and lovers. The gender and development discourse, feminist debates, and other international initiatives, like the Millennium Development Goals, MDG, have hardly actualized the concept of the male reproductive body into programs of action. A lack of discussion and debates on male reproductive bodies suggest that embodied reproductive bodies mainly refer to female labor. 3.5 Women and productive bodies. In this section, we will analyze women's laboring body in relation to the labor market. Specifically, it will explore the constraints or challenges faced by women when they compete with men in the labor market. 3.5.1 The female body and the global labor market. As more and more women join the labor force, various types of questions surfaced within feminist discourse. In this section, we will attempt to answer the following questions. Why does the labor market reflect gender segregation? 2. Why do women make negotiations between their productive and caring bodies? The labor market and workplace grew on the structural inequality between the home and the work sphere in both the mind and consciousness. For women, productive labor is perceived to be an extension of their home sphere, whereas, for men, reproductive sphere is perceived to be a limiting sphere of action. In 1980s and 1990s, we saw millions of women entering into emerging global labor markets, which certainly had set the trend towards viewing female productive body as a sustainable source of flexible, docile and cheap labor, Whitridge 2000 cited in Harcourt 2009. This process of feminization of labor is growing in tandem with formalization of labor market. Both these processes are related and emphasize the fact that female productive bodies are still undermined in the labor market in various ways. Let us discuss the embodied experiences of women who participate in productive and caring work as well. Most of these women work in the informal economy and are often invisible in the analysis of market and economic growth. As Harcourt, 2009, stated, it is important to answer the question of how productive and care work overlap with each other in lives of women and create new forms of relationship. In this context, she argues that the mainstream analysis of the market economy needs to include the stress and strains associated with new roles of women in relation to their productive bodies. For example, toys sewn by women's hand in Chinese factories, African women's efforts to provide cut flowers and fruits to global supermarkets, and Asian women in sweatshops stitching cheap clothes and shoes for the world around are thus far invisible in the analysis of the productive laboring body. Therefore, the connections between women's embodied lives in these invisible forms of labor with the changing socio-economic lifestyle of the middle class need to be drawn upon and discussed in the context of gender analysis of the laboring body. Balancing between the productive and family work by the middle class and poor women is of serious concern to feminists, as the female body is caught between the spheres of production and reproduction. As Geeta Sen argued, women are in the crossroad between production and reproduction, cited in Harcourt, 2009, p.71, quoted by Kabir, 2007, p.9. Hence, it is important to unravel the interconnections between women's productive bodies and other aspects like workplace harassment, working hours, nature of work, and informalization of female labor. Paid labor is not necessarily always emancipating for all women across caste, class, and occupation. It is equally important to reflect on the invisible side of women's productive bodies, wherein women are engaged in cheap labor, and the relationship between women and the nature of work, both paid and unpaid. 3.5.2 Negotiating with the labor market. As we discussed in the preceding section, the labor market has an inbuilt character of gender segregation. Similarly, other social embodiments like marriage, class, and caste, which are associated with the female productive body, deny her access to a particular job. Young unmarried women have better chances of joining occupations of their own choice than married women. In her work on globalization, marriage, and Masculinities, Nalakbir has stated that younger women entering the labor market are likely to benefit as economic independence gives them a sense of control over their lives and reproductive bodies. However, married women joining the labor market are likely to be constantly on guard as they negotiate time, labor, and the nature of work to manage their reproductive roles along with the paid work. In this situation, the female productive body comes under double suppression, i.e., suppression from family and the work sphere as well. Suppression from the family manifests in different ways, such as male resistance to accept domestic responsibilities, marriage breakdown, excessive alcoholism, higher rate of suicide, and domestic violence, cited in Harcourt, p.75. Male productive bodies are reluctant to take on family responsibilities with a view to sustain their identity and dominance, and on the other hand, the female body takes the burden of working long hours to manage both paid and unpaid responsibilities as a matter of natural duty. In the past decades, feminists like Jane Friedman, Maria Rosa Dalla Costa, and other feminists have demanded wages for housework while referring to the theoretical debate of the Marxist theory of capitalism. They argue that women's housework like care work, childbearing, and nurturing enabled the capitalist system to sustain and expand. Therefore, the household labor is necessary for the production of surplus, reproduction of labor, and continuance of the whole capitalist system. Friedman, 2001, p.53. This analysis signifies the relationship between women's labor and economic production in the society. However, these analyses fail to capture the aspect of women's embodied lives in a particular socio-cultural setup and their everyday struggle to balancing the spheres of production and reproduction. It is not always possible for a woman to have access to work of her choice. Women's access to a particular form of work gives them self-esteem and a sense of social and material empowerment in their everyday lives. Let us take another case study from Meenakshi Thapan's work, which brings out the connections between women's paid and unpaid work and factors like caste, class and poverty. Premvati, who hails from Haryana. She was married in quite young age and had a daughter within 2 years of her marriage. Initially, her husband didn't allow her to work outside the home in the name of family honor. She wanted to be engaged in a job to organize the dowry amount for her 5 daughters. Additionally, she didn't want to work as domestic labor because of the association of caste impurity with the occupation. For her, the factory work was more suitable because she felt the factory space is detached from any caste identity. Premavati's lack of freedom to take up paid work consequently increased her burden of physical labor, and she gave birth to 7 children. After she had her family planning operation, she continued to do family work alongside paid work as she considered work is crucial to women's existence. Thapan, p. 143. In this case, the emphasis is on the notion of productive body, which every woman requires it for survival. Often, women negotiate with a particular work out of compulsion because every social situation is not under the control of every woman. Here, nature of paid work may not be emancipatory for the woman, but her earning capacity as paid worker saves her in economic crisis. Similarly, stresses and strains of factory work, inappropriate working time, and working place do not always address the specific needs of the female body both in the formal and informal economy. The amount of physical strains that women experience in carrying out both household and paid work often leads to ill health. The existing gender hierarchies within the labor market have certain invisible implications for female bodies. Women who work in export firms and other private companies suffer due to low wages, lack of flexi-work hours, sexual harassment, long working hours, and so on. As Harcourt points out, additional problems of the female productive body are associated with lack of security during night, restricted toilet breaks, and mothers not having adequate child care facilities. For single women, devaluation of their social status is an issue of serious concern. For instance, women working in call centers or doing night shifts are continuously viewed as women of loose character by the society. Reena Patel's 2011 recent study, Working the Night Shift, reflects the construction of the female productive liberated body in relation to time and space. In Dhaka, Bangladesh, migrant women who go out to work in export-oriented factories often experience hostility, abuse and violence during the night. The street and factory both become sites of women's bodily violence at night. Patel argues that space and time construct the gendered nature of the laboring body. However, women working in night shifts have challenged the traditional understanding that women are safe at home. Working at night can be seen as an evolving strategy for women to assert the notion of productive yet liberated bodies in the discourse of the global economy and existing patriarchy. Further, Patel's analysis shows how different stakeholders use women's bodies as sites of every nation's economic pride. When women embody a productive body, they come under surveillance and public scrutiny by various stakeholders. For example, when women's productive bodies are depicted in films, they are always shown in supportive roles like private secretaries, receptionists, and as wives. However, several recent films in India depict female productive bodies as bold women, and simultaneously their bodies and lives are negatively portrayed. These representations of female bodies can also be seen in other domains of public life. 3.5.3 Challenging the nurturer role of women. According to Gatrell, within professions and family business, very few women have taken influential and decision-making roles. The author quotes Puvar, 2004, who describes women who invade traditionally male spaces such as the House of Commons and the corporate boardrooms, thereby manifesting the troubled dream of the future in the 19th century, p. 116. The image given below describes the fear of the unseen, i.e., the dream of a troubled future which challenges the angelic role of women within the household while invading male-dominated spaces in politics and professions. Gatrell stated that when women encroach upon the male-dominated arenas in the labor market, they come under severe scrutiny. Hence, women experience both isolation and pressure from the surroundings, and they are compelled to comply with male-embodied norms in the workplace. The symbolizations relating to work with women's bodies have had an adverse impact on women's careers and professional development in contemporary times. Similarly, in areas of family business, small-scale industries and agriculture, the division between women's paid and unpaid work gets blurred and women's contribution to work is further undermined and devalued. Within family businesses, women's contribution is hardly ever acknowledged. In the formal domain of work, women are not only compromised on equal pay, but also sometimes offered the jobs which are not preferred by men. For example, in recent years, marketing jobs have become available for women in the management sector since men opt for financial marketing. Women who work in the male-dominated spheres eventually adapt themselves to masculine norms and the organizational culture of management. Women face uncomfortable consequences when they occupy jobs which are predominantly associated with the male body. Similarly, women in senior roles face exclusion and isolation when they cross boundaries of the kinds of work associated with the notion of maternal body. Gatrell, 2008. 3.5.4 The maternal body and the productive body, social misconceptions. As we have discussed earlier, women's productive and reproductive roles are intrinsically related. Across societies, women suffer from the misconception that maternal bodies are not capable of carrying out productive work, Guttrell has tried to explore some social perceptions about the processes associated with the maternal body. She argues that the Anglo-American society has traditionally associated women with norms of heterosexuality, wifehood, and homemaking. Hence, women's engagement with reproductive labor and men's association with productive labor continue to expand the increasing gender division of labor. Similarly, the labor market follows the model of gender stereotyping and encourages women to continue their reproductive roles against accepting productive roles. Misconceptions such as women being non-committed, unreliable workers, and unsuitable for senior positions in the labor market still persist. In fear of disrupting the social norms, women rarely inhabit the sphere which is traditionally associated with the male body. Another perception is employers' fear of women's absence from work due to pregnancy. Organizations see pregnancy as an embodied awkward condition that puts women in a disadvantageous position to work. There are a very few women in senior and executive positions whose bodies at the beginning make them out for competition. Many employers associate the female pregnant body with lowered employee commitment, instability, ill health, workplace, and absence, EOC 2005 as cited in Gartel, p. 132. Likewise, the period of menstruation is equated with unstable moods and unpredictable behavior. Therefore, in the productive sphere, women's reproductive functions have not been addressed or been an issue of concern in the labor market. We can see that reproductive bodies have taken an insignificant position to survive. Productive female body in the labor market activity. Does the labor market differentiate between the female and male productive body? Use examples from films, books, reports, and your own experience and collect case note from different individuals. Analyze the case notes using the concepts and ideas you have learned in this unit. 3.6 Sumamri. This unit discusses the association between women's embodied labor and their body and the labor market. It deals with the concept of women's embodiment in relation to different forms of laboring bodies and explains how women experience their transition from the maternal body to the productive body. Further, it describes different socio-economic and cultural contexts which enable and constrain women to occupy various types of laboring bodies. The unit raises some important concerns with regard to the invisible challenges associated with women's productive bodies and how the reproductive body gets submerged under the productive body. It draws attention to a neglected field within the discourse of gender, development, and the labor market. Thank you for watching. We will see you in the next video with next chapter.